out here in 5th Avenue, Midtown Manhattan. Right across from me is the Fred French building, very famous, very beautiful building. This is where we teach our project management classes. We're Lerner Management Consulting, partnering with PACE. Giving a speech on November 13th, that's Monday at 6 o'clock, by popular demand, called How to Conquer Time Management. Going to be talking about the various principles about how to conquer time management. We'll see you there.
And hello everyone, my name is Jerome. This thing doesn't go very far. My name is Jerome Bridgman. I'm the program manager for the academic outreach section at PMI and Pace, and I've had the opportunity to work with so many of you here tonight. And thank you so much for your support. The very first time I started doing this, Darlene was the very first person who registered and showed up, and it's always good to see you, Darlene, when you show up here.
You're welcome.
Yeah. PMI NYC, we are a non-for-profit organization. We were started in 1969. We have over 200 plus thousand employees and members, etc., in over 150 countries. If you are not a member and you're interested in becoming a member, I'll be happy to talk to you after this session. Or if you want to learn more and more about PMI or project management, it's a great opportunity. It's a great place to come to network. I am involved in the biologics. I work for a biological company in New Jersey. We do medical devices. And it's always good to hear so many different things in computer engineering, in the theater, in the movies, whatever, you name it. There are so many different ways. We do have our monthly meetings. You're welcome if you'd like to join us one of these days. Please see me. I'll put you on the list so you can introduce yourself to some other people in your field. I am one of the volunteers here. The volunteering, it's a good program for me. I think I get to meet so many interesting people. And these are some of the people who are here. I have Janice. I've known Janice through this program. I've known Maylene through this program. And here we have Irvin in the back there. So thank you all, and I hope to see all of your faces again in the future, in future programs that we have here. Joshua, what can I say? Joshua is an excellent speaker to me. He is, whenever we call on him, he shows up. He always says yes, which is always good. It makes our lives easier. He is the CEO of Lerner Management. He is the president. If you have any issues with chapter 7 of the Pinball book, he actually helped in writing that.
Project Management Competency Development Framework.
Right.
PDCM.
So he authored this part of it. He does a lot of consulting. Apart from being a good speaker, I told you the work breakdown structure. We did it a few months ago. I'm going to reintroduce it. So if you would like to be on the waiting list, I'll give you a heads up as soon as I'm about to launch it. I've learned so much about it. I've been reading up on PMI. I've been working on project management for over 15 years now. But about a few years ago, I really got deeply involved in project management. And I've learned a lot from him over the years, and I continue to learn a lot from him. He has an extensive background. I'm not going to go into more details, but I just want to share it with you. Welcome, Joshua, please.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that. Again, welcome to How to Conquer Time Management. I'm going to skip this second. So what is project time management? Let me kind of just hold the audience for a second. How many people here found out about this event via PMI New York City? Everybody.
Yes.
How many people found out via PACE? Okay. How many PMPs do we have here? Okay. Wow. Very good. Excellent. And when you signed up for this particular presentation, and this is really interactive, what were you expecting to get out of this? Was it to enhance your time? When you heard how to conquer time management, what came out of you? John, yeah.
Time management is keeping track of everything you have to do is not easy. And moving things around and just trying to make the best use of your time is something that I'm always looking for improvement in.
Okay, great. Any others? Yeah.
I wanted to see all the stuff I forgot since I passed the exam.
There you go. So, as
I'm
Morgan
looking at this formulas thing, Madonna mia, did I forget it?
Yeah. So as Morgan said, I actually do teach the PMP boot camp class here. Yes, we just finished up 2 classes, very formula heavy. Any others? Maybe just a refresher, generalization. Okay. So we thought maybe a good way to start this up in project time management is a little video here. Let's take a look. You see some of the inputs, some of the outputs, called the ITOs, ITTO, input, tools and techniques, outputs, you sound a little familiar, and all of the processes. Sorry about that. I'll try not to move. So I'm done. That's it. That's all you need to know, right? Okay. So probably all those PMP questions are coming back in terms of the 47 processes and how many they fit inside of the project time management space. So again, what is project management? It is one of the 10 knowledge areas for the PMBOK. PMBOK, again, is Project Management Body of Knowledge. For those that may not know, PMI just released the 6th edition. Anybody get the 6th edition yet?
No.
Okay, if you're a member, you get that. I believe you get that for free online, the online version, not the textbook version. That came out in September. For those who have not yet taken the PMP exam and you are interested, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot here, but the deadline for that was the end of this year. PMI has since increased that to, I think, the middle of March 2018. So you got a little bit more time to study for that. In time management, project time management, there are 7 processes, as you saw that rapid artist sketch out. Plan, schedule management, define activities, sequence activities, estimate activity resources, estimate activity durations, by far the largest, develop schedule, and then control schedule, as you saw those 2 arms in there. Okay. So in a nutshell, we can call this kind of this schedule life cycle, right? There's a lot of different components that go into building a project schedule. So in define the work, you're really here listing out all of the deliverables, right? And determining on your estimate technique. Is a top-down approach where you start with the project phases, and then maybe you're building out the activities within that phase, right? If you're doing what's called a bottom-up approach, you start listing all of the activities, and then you're arranging them in various relevant categories. On the next chevron here, you got sort and sequence the work. All right, so some tasks occur before the start or completion of other tasks, while other tasks can start independently. All right, so you got to figure out what needs to be completed, what order do these need to be done. And then dependencies, you have things called predecessor tasks, successor tasks. What are the logical relationships between them? We'll talk about things like FF. What's FF? Finish to finish, SS, start to start, finish to start. What are the logical relationships within the PDM, the precedence diagramming method? And then you have the duration. You need to determine the time it's going to take to complete each task. All right, when should each task and deliverable be completed? Is it realistic to complete the work in this estimated time frame? Sometimes you get what we call imposed dates, dates that were not set by you as the project manager, but imposed possibly by a key stakeholder or the project sponsor. And then you have assigning resources, determining who is doing what. All right, so kind of just a high level of the schedule life cycle. All right, so the first process area we're going to look at is how to define activities. Any thoughts? How do you guys define activities today within your projects? And there's no wrong answer. Okay. Sometimes it might be formal, sometimes a little less informal, right? Maybe you get the project team together, you start strategizing top-down approach. Well, let's look at the definition. I'm sorry, John?
I would start by looking at and getting a clear understanding of the, let's say, the requirements or what's expected, and then looking at what's going to take. What is it going to take to deliver whatever it's going to be?
Sure.
To come out of this project.
Harry?
I would say
And by the way, I don't have these names memorized. Some of the folks I know, some I just met. I can't see your lapel that well, but I remember his name. Yes. So don't feel offended if I don't remember your name.
I would start with saying what the activity is. Find out that's the first thing.
Okay.
What is it about?
Okay. So starting to decompose and break down the work into smaller work units or packages. Yeah.
Yeah, decomposing work packages.
Excellent. Yep. Okay. So various forms, right? Let's look at the definition as per PMI for defined activity. So it is the process of identifying and documenting the specifications to be performed to produce the project deliverables. It breaks down the work packages into activities, again, work packages into activities, we'll come back to that, that provide a basis for estimating, scheduling, executing, monitoring, and controlling the project work. All right, so that's just kind of the textbook definition. Now, an activity, what is that? That is a distinct portion of work performed during the course of the project. The activities can be created based on the work packages created in the WVS. So as Jerome mentioned, I had done a presentation several months earlier this year at PACE where we did the value of creating the WVS, the work breakdown structure. And as we get into that, the lowest level of the WVS, as we call the work package, technically are not tasks. So there is a distinction between the decomposition of the work breakdown structure and how you actually create tasks. A lot of people teach it incorrectly, but that is the right way to create the WVS, which we'll get into. All right, then we have something called attributes, activity attributes, multiple attributes associated with each schedule activity that can be included within the activity list. Right? These can include activity codes, predecessor activities, successor activities, logical relationships, leads and lags. We'll get into this. Resource requirements. You can also have assumptions and constraints and dates. So it's almost what we call like the metadata of your data, right? Of your scheduling data. And if you look at this strip, may look familiar. How many people here use Microsoft Project? Okay, about 20%. Yep. So that's a lot of the selectable fields from the drop-down list that you might be familiar with. All right? So all define activities. All right. So if we take you back kind of to the PMBOK, which is a lot of where we're going with this, we talked about this is time management, so it's the time management knowledge area. There is another knowledge area in the stack of 10 called scope management. And we talked about the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure is not necessarily conducted as an exercise in the time management knowledge area. It's done earlier in scope management. Okay? Now, it is a good lead-in. It is a good input into your scheduling process, but scope management. So we're just making a little distinction here that this is normally done in scope management. Now, a couple of brainstorming techniques that you might use, and you might not even know what they're called, but you might have used these in terms of your regular working period. So this is called mind mapping. Has anybody heard of mind mapping? Okay, anybody ever used mind mapping? Okay, appreciate your honesty. So a lot of things we know we don't use, and that's okay.
The ones are going to be very honest.
Yep, so sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. So mind mapping, I think, can be a valuable exercise. Let's see what it says. So this, you start with a core idea, right? What's the nucleus of the idea in the middle? And you basically, you can do this on a whiteboard, and you can actually do this in software. There's excellent mind mapping software out there. Technically, if you have Visio, I think professional version, you can have the templates, it's already there. So we're going to give you little tips along the way here. Audience would be SMEs. What are SMEs? Subject matter experts around the issue. Useless exercise if you don't have SMEs in the room. Remember, when you're doing your decomposition or when you're building your schedule, the project manager does not have to do it alone. Get your whole team in the room. When I start a project, I do a mind mapping exercise, or I do what's known as an affinity diagram. You get your SMEs in the room and you start to just mind map, right? So brainstorm main topics related to the center theme, and you add them around this central idea. You connect the subtopics to the main topics with arrows, and this one isn't perfectly illustrated, but usually you have the heavier or lighter arrows for the main and the minor points. All right. All right, another brainstorming technique we just talked about is affinity diagrams. So let's take a look at this one. You start with miscellaneous data, then finds relationships. When would you use this? When confronted with many facts or ideas in a chaotic situation or environment. Ideas are too large to comprehend when you need group consensus. Usually conducted with stickies. Ideas are written down. They're placed randomly on a wall. Then a team looks for commonalities between the ideas and groups under new subgroups. All right, team discusses as a group, and they allow teams to move away, I like this one, from preconceived categories, tapping into a different perspective of looking into the problem and solution. Okay, anybody have used this technique? Excellent technique. It's actually the converse of mind mapping. There's commonalities, but it's the converse because you are focused with mind mapping around a central idea. In this one, if I were to take this room, and I've actually done this in the past, also in training, in Dale Carnegie training, where they'll give everybody a bunch of stickies, and then on the main topic, you would write down a lot of random thoughts or subjects on that, and you would randomly place this on a wall. Then the next exercise is the group starts repositioning into categories. And as mentioned there, you move away from that preconceived notion of thinking of a category because there may be categories here in the amber that you might not have thought of, right? Brainstorming techniques, right? Things to tap into as you build in your activities. Okay. Okay, so now we talk about the WBS, work breakdown structure. Let's look at this from a definition perspective. So it is a hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of work to be carried out by the project team to accomplish the project objectives and the required deliverables. Again, part of scope management. So decomposition, identifying and analyzing the deliverables and the related work. Structuring and organizing the WBS, decomposing the upper WBS levels into the lower WBS levels. We'll show you an example of this. Developing and assigning the identification codes. Right? There is a numbering schema as it pertains to the WBS as you go lower and lower. Right? We'll also show you how that dovetails into a Microsoft work plan. All right? And you can do this if you're more comfortable and familiar in creating your project schedules in a tool like Excel or Primavera. But as you indent your activities, Microsoft Project understands the relationship of what you're trying to do category-wise in your decomposition, where it will automatically create that numbering schema for you. We'll show you. All right, and again, verifying that the degree of decomposition of the deliverables is appropriate. The biggest question everyone asks in WBS is, when do I stop? Right? How far low do I go? All right, so that's just high level. Okay, and this is kind of just more of a quick recap, because this is an excellent part 2 from this part 1 that we had a presentation on earlier. So some of the benefits of a WBS, it shows what the various elements of the project are. It shows how the required work is distributed between the different elements of the project. You can also use this, we won't get into this, but this was on the other presentation, how you can use the WBS to quantify your project from a financial viewpoint, right? Shows how the cost or budget is distributed between the elements of the project. So in that particular presentation, we used a $10 million project. We called it a PACE pseudo project, and we showed how the build out of the WBS was able to itemize it from a cost perspective, right? That's the second level. We call that the account control level of the WBS. Shows how the larger elements of the project are subdivided into smaller ones. We just heard 2 comments that you are decomposing that into smaller, more manageable work units. All right, that's the purpose. And another one here, it doesn't say anything about individual tasks or the order of execution. Not the point, not the purpose of the WBS. And then some top guidelines, right? Do it with your team. You don't need to do this in a silo. It should contain at least 3 levels. All right, I'll show you an example. Don't confuse a WBS work package to a task. Name a WBS component as a noun versus a verb. Okay, might be a little distinction between a deliverable versus a task. The 100% rule. Anybody know what the 100% rule is? So each lower level of scope must be reflected in the higher level or vice versa. So when you're building your WBS, it should encompass 100% of the project, top down or bottom up, right, is the intent at a high level. WBS will not be completed product on the first attempt. There's going to be several iterations, what we call progressive elaboration, right, rolling wave. In the beginning of your project, you know very little, right? So it is progressively elaborated, right, in an iterative fashion, not to be confused with Sprint or Scrum Works, right? It's basically something that you will continue to refine as you get more fidelity into your project and your requirements. Tasks should be small enough to be assigned to individual resources, right? Not the WBS, right? You're not doing task assignment at that layer. And the lowest level of the WBS is the work package, all right? And then notice here it says summary tasks on your project work plan. For those that are familiar with Microsoft Project, you know we call those roll-up summary tasks, right? So if you have a stack of 10 tasks and then you've got one roll-up and you collapse that one usually turns bold, right? That's your summary. That's usually the layer of the lowest WBS work package at the summary level within your detailed project work plan. All right, we'll show you some examples of that. And then the 880 rule, okay, another good one. Work packages should be greater than 8 hours and less than 80 hours. Just general rule of thumb. Okay, we're all familiar with this, right? Okay, we call this the ITEC model. Why do we call it the ITEC model?
Initiate, planning, executing.
You'll never forget that on a test, right? Initiating, planning, executing. Technically, it's monitoring, controlling, but if you remember, it's controlling, monitoring, and closing. So we kind of call that the ITEC model. For those that are familiar with the SDLC, Systems Development Lifecycle, or Software Development Lifecycle, this is just a way to illustrate how your SDLC rolls up and fits neatly into the overall PLC, your project lifecycle. So initiating, that's pretty easy. Planning, it's usually kind of a planning and analyze. Some clients and organizations do planning and analyze as one phase. And then executing is really where the rubber meets the road, right? Design, build, test, deploy, and then closing, or whatever that entails in your particular client organization, or a lot of your closing deliverables. So the reason we're illustrating this is, in terms of time management, a great way in starting your projects when you start to build out your activities is kind of the one thing you're going to know off the bat without even knowing the scope or the objective of the project is what? You're probably going to run through a life cycle, right? From beginning to end. And you're probably going to run through this particular model here. So as we look at the SDLC particular area, you know, initiating, right? Usually when the sponsor identifies a need or opportunity, the concept proposal is created. Planning, develop your PMP, not your certificate, but your project management plan, and your various planning documents. Provides the basis for acquiring the resources needed to achieve a solution. Analyze. Anybody here a BSA or a business systems analyst, a business analyst? Okay, how many people here started as a business analyst? Oh, not many, okay. Usually kind of a natural progression, BAs kind of turn to PMs. But this is kind of where the business analyst lives, right? In the analyze phase. They're pretty much managing that phase, right? They're collecting requirements, technical requirements, business requirements, functional requirements, vendor requirements, right? All into a BRD, a business requirements document. Then what are they doing? They're doing a fit gap analysis. FG, is it a fit, is it a gap? Is my software product going to do what the requirement says it's going to do? Is it a gap? Do I need a bolt-on solution? Gap resolution, right? Then they create a bunch of process flows, as is in 2B. What does the system or what does the process look like today? What is it going to look future state, tomorrow, right? So that's pretty much what they're doing in that space, in the analyze phase. Design, depending on your document, can be, who knows what an FD is, a TD. Your functional designs, your technical designs, right? These are your detailed design documents, right, that are going to take those requirements and translate them into deliverables called design documents, right, either functional or technical. Right, so before you get to your build, that's where your technical writers, right, a lot of people conflate a technical writer with a developer. And in my experience, those are usually two different skill sets. Right? If you ever get somebody who's a very good technical writer, I always say hold on to that person. These are people that are taking the requirements that have now been translated into a functional design, and they're basically doing the write-up of what the code set is going to look like based on that functional design. They're not programming it. That's usually a paper-based deliverable, right? And then the term code to spec, once you get to the build, I should be able to hire any knowledgeable developer off the street who knows how to code to spec. What are they taking? They're taking the technical design and they're basically coding to that specification, right? So that's where you get into the build, right? And then the build unit test, they kind of go hand in hand. And then testing, how many people are familiar with like test cases and test scenarios? Okay, like real formal test cases. We'll get into some metrics on the scheduling side in a little bit. But basically that's where you have your test scenarios, right? Then from your test scenarios, you build what are called test cases. And then in a given test case, you have itemized test steps. They call it test scripts. Why do they call it a script? Think of a movie script, right? You're not ad-libbing. You're not trying to test on the side and trying to break the system. You're following a script from logging in to either a pass or fail, right? All done in the testing space. And then your deploy, depending on what your project looks like, would be your activation plan all the way through your go live or your production cutover. Okay. So again, just establishing the framework on your PLC and how that's going to help you get to the next area in organizing the work. All right. So back to the WBS. Right. Simple example here. I think we call this, in the other class we called it the Tesla, but let's call this the Pace electric bus. Right. So how many layers or how many levels do we have in this WBS? Okay, this might not be the best illustration because it's a little hard to see. There's 4, right? So you got 1, 2, 3, and then one more there.
Oh.
Right, a little hard to see. Usually it's represented in boxes. These are like open carrots here. So basically, you've got your 4 levels here, right? So you've got the Pace electric bus. You've got the frame, the paint, the wheels, braking system, shifting system, integration, and another one for project management. So how you layer this in your first layer and your second layer is really up to you, right? It depends on the construct of your project. It could be a construction project, it could be a hospital project, it could be an IT project. It really depends on how you want to break down the work. And then your frame, you can see the breakdown, seat, center, steering wheel, frame, right? Wheels, front wheels, rear wheels, pretty straightforward. Integration, concept, design, assembly, testing. And then within testing, this one's a little hard to see, you've got your different types of tests, component test, product test, and customer test. This is more of a product project, right? You're building something. Yes.
So level 2 would be your roll-up. That would be pretty much defining each section in your, say, your MS project plan.
Yeah. So from the WVS construct perspective, we call this one the summary roll-up. Technically, how it interlays into projects is a little bit different. This is called the account control, the second layer, and the third layer or the fourth layer. After that's really the work package. Is the work package once you get it to the lowest level. Okay. And we'll show you what that looks like, how it intertwines into MSP. All right, good question. So here's another example, but you'll notice that it's laid out a little differently. So how are we laying this particular project out by? Take a look.
By the SDLC.
By the SDLC, right? Any number of ways you can do it. So we happen to be doing it that way for this project. Normally when I start a project and I know anything about it, I might do the mind mapping exercise, I might get into the Affinity Diagrams, I'll do my WBS, but that is one thing I know. If it's an IT project, I'm going to have to go through this life cycle anyway, right? And that's where you start trying to decompose the work with your team. So initially, this is more from a deliverables perspective, your charter, right? Your budget, your work plan, your quality management plan, your communications management plan, your risk management plan, all your sub-deliverables that roll up into your PMP, your project management plan, functional requirements, technical requirements, business process workflow diagrams, right? Functional design, technical design, fit gap analysis, build your code sets, your test cases, your training materials, test, system test, integration test, E2E test, UAT, training, and then your cutover plan and your transition plan. Now you notice the numbering schema in this. What's pretty apparent in the numbering schema as you go level 1 through 3?
Number 1 is consistent.
The number 1 is consistent, yep, in this particular case. So you'll notice in level 1 is singular, level 2 2 digits, level 3 is 3 digits,
Yeah.
and in the other one, I'll go back to the other one, I think we had 4 levels, right?
Right.
We got 4. Now, a little trick for those Microsoft Project users, not that I'm promoting the product, but in Microsoft Project, if you hit the drop down on the column, on the field, there actually is a field called WBS number, okay? And Microsoft Project automatically does this for you. So that's why I said when you indent, it understands that you're going 1.3.1.1, depends on your grouping and your indentation. That's all it is. So if you have everything stacked under, wheels, and you indent twice, one for front wheels, one for rear wheels, it should automatically create a numbering schema that looks something like this, at least from a dot numbering perspective. Now, if this was task number 2, it would be doing the same thing. 2.1, 3.1, etc. Depends on how you set up your project. Yes?
An outline, basically. It's similar to an outline that you might do.
Yeah.
In a document.
It's like a table of contents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. And sometimes I personally like to use WBS number, and sometimes you can have like 10 numbers out there. I do kind of projects that are literally 9,000, 10,000 items long for these multi-mega projects. And sometimes I like to do my own numbering schema. Some people just like to use the real number, right? That's really up to you. Okay.
Just a question.
Yes.
So I grew up where you're saying that these will actually come into your Microsoft project plan. Now, I grew up in a world where, and I tell my I have 4 junior PMs, and I tell them everything must start with a verb. So you're saying is that now the conventional wisdom is that if it's a summary task, go ahead, make it a noun, and then anything under that should be verbs.
So the general rule of thumb is the deliverable is more noun-based, the activity or the task is
verbs.
verb-based.
Okay.
Yep.
So if I use project and I said, okay, this is my WBS, then everything under like project charter would be first thing, go get paper.
Develop project charter, right.
Facetious.
Build out project charter
Okay.
would be your task,
Okay.
right? The deliverable itself is the project charter, right? Yep. Yeah, good distinction. Yep. So again, we're not going out to the activity level. That
Right.
resides under there where
Right.
you're assigning resources to the discrete task layer. Okay. Okay. So a couple of things on define activities. Who's familiar with the milestones? Okay. So it's what we call a milestone poll, right? A milestone schedule, a significant point or event in a project, program, portfolio, a summary level schedule that identifies the major schedule milestones. Should be important event dates in the project schedule, easily recognizable to everyone. Okay, so by definition, a milestone has how much duration?
0.
All right, 0 duration, right? So that's a milestone. So just another output. We'll get into some examples. If there's one more here. So this is actually an example, a real example of one that I use on my executive project management status reports. It's kind of right in the middle. And on the left side, I think we have like the key activities, the go live date in the upper left, key activities, key decisions. On the right side, what's on tap in the next 2 weeks, key risks, key issues. And then you have your milestone poll right in the middle. All right, and we've actually implemented this in about 7 different companies who are still using this. Oh, I did have a camp. Okay, I did have an example here. So it looks something like this. This one got a little shifted for some reason. But an example of an executive project manager report, one that we send out weekly, where you have your milestones baked right in. Now, when you're starting your project, right, again, you don't know much at that point. You might want to go regular SDLC or PLC heavy, plan, analyze, design, build, test, deploy, because that's how much real estate you can probably fit on a given one-page dashboard, right, and kind of the major deliverables. But what we like to do is as you start getting into your project, right, you want to see a little more fidelity, a little more granularity in your milestones. So this is a milestone poll. It'll kind of go up, 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 right? So in ascending order, this one starts in, let's call it September of this year. It goes right around, is that April 2018. So as these, we usually like to leave a date out there for like 1 week, so your executive stakeholders can see that was an accomplishment, using your red, yellow, green. I think we like to use white if there's no impact, blue, or gray if it's completed, for 1 week. So let's say this week is come and gone, a couple of weeks, these go up, everything shifts up, and you've got more milestones underneath. It's just like an elevator, right? Just keeps going up, and that's a way to kind of use for milestone poll. Does that make sense? Okay, some more stuff. How to sequence activities. All right, how do we sequence activities? Definition. Sequence activities, the process of identifying and documenting relationships among the project activities, defines the logical sequence of work to obtain the greatest efficiency given all project constraints. Okay, who here has heard of a PDM, a precedence diagramming method? Okay, a couple people. So this is a technique used for constructing a schedule model in which activities are represented by nodes. We'll show you some examples. They're graphically linked by one or more logical relationships between activities. Then we get into things called predecessor and successor. Your predecessor activity is an activity that logically comes before a dependent activity in your schedule. And the successor is the converse. It is a dependent activity that logically comes after another activity in the schedule. Okay, let's look at an example here. All right, so this is called the PDM, a precedence diagramming method, right? And it's represented in the form of what's called AON, arrow on node, or activity on node, right? So the nodes are considered the boxes that contain the activities, and the arrows show what? The logical relationships, right? Right. So aside from the start and the finish activities, each activity in the network diagram has at least one predecessor and one successor. So in this example, let's take a look here. Activity A is a construction project, I think, yep, is frame the walls, right? Any predecessor in this case? No. Successors are B and D, install the plumbing, install electrical, right? What is B? B is install plumbing. What's the successor?
C.
Inspect plumbing, right? D, install electrical. Successor? Inspect, install, inspect. And then the last one, you end with install drywall, right? And it's got multiple relationships. So in this particular example, there's not much you can tell from this example. Why? There's no detail. There's no dates, right? If there's no days, there's nothing there. What's one thing you can possibly glean from this very, very high level precedence diagramming method from a risk perspective?
Gives you an idea of what needs to be done first. That's the only, it's a sequence.
Where might the most risk lie?
Yeah.
It's tough to vet this one out.
Start dependencies.
Which one?
The dependencies, like what?
So which activity specifically would you say bears the most possible risk?
The first one, because without it, there's no success in those things.
Okay.
Both A and F.
I would say that.
Why F?
Oh, because if you don't finish F, you don't finish the project.
If you don't finish, right, all excellent answers. Also, which one has multiple predecessors coming into it? F. So there's multiple points of potential failure because it's got multiple or more than one predecessor. So a lot of things need to go right versus just the other relationships. Yep, excellent. Okay, we're going to come back to that. Okay, so in this particular example, we're still sequencing, right? This is called what we call a finish to start relationship. Okay, let's take a look at this one. So again, this is the most common method. It's so common for those that might be doing dependencies, again, in a product like Microsoft Project. It doesn't even list the acronym of FS because it assumes everything is finish to start. In most of your projects, it's going to be a finish to start relationship. What do we mean by finish to start? So in this example, what do we have? Correct framing. That's how many weeks? 7 weeks. From here to here is 7, I believe. These are historical dates here, but February 23rd through April 10th, right? Over the course of 7 weeks. Install roof is the successor, right? Finish to start. Can't start the install roof until,
This one is finished.
right? Finish to start relationship. Can't start before. They're done in sequence, not in parallel, not overlapping, right? So that's what we call an FS relationship, finish to start. Okay? That may, and depending on your relationship types, will either elongate your project or condense your project. We'll talk about certain compression techniques and tricks. All right? Pretty straightforward on that one. Let's take a look at another one here. All right. So now you've got a start to start. This is one that you would have to tweak in a tool like Project where if you've got more than one dependency, notice that? What do you got here? 4SS. That's how it would be represented in a tool like Microsoft Project. That says that activity 4, which is what? Build walls, duration 12 weeks, right? Now you're going from February to May, like so. Predecessor, but install gate can happen when?
The same story.
Same exact date, right? February 23rd. Start to start relationship. Both can start at the same time, right? But we're saying 4SS is basically how you would numerically represent that relationship type when you're doing your linking. Okay? If you were to use like an IT example, we talked about things like the business requirements, right? So let's say the business requirements would be up here. The design can begin for the application team, for the training team, for the testing team, right? So if the requirements were done initially, if that's not represented here, the start to start training, design of your training materials, design of your testing scenarios, design of your application can start at the same time. They may have different durations, right? But they can begin at the same time. Make sense?
Now, do you normally use this, Joshua, when it must start at the same? Because all those things you named, you didn't have to have any relationship between them at all, like what you said. But my recollection is that if you do have it must start, and I can't think of something right now, but the stuff you were saying, you didn't really need to have like an example of the training. Just do them. Just you have them in there.
So excellent question. The question is when, if I'm understanding correctly, when do you need to physically hard code that it is in fact the start to start relationship? So excellent ciphering there. Technically, why don't you just have the same date, 2/23?
Right.
Design testing, design training. That's when we get to the critical path, right? When we get to things like the critical path and understanding how much slack or float or lag time is built into your schedule, right? When you're talking smaller projects, right, you can manage it pretty much on a tracker, much easier to manage. If you're talking much larger projects and your sponsor says, well, show me the critical path, show me where we've got 5 days lag, a much tougher exercise to do without the proper relationships. Yep. Good questions. Okay. So next we have what's called the FF, the finish to finish. Right? So this allows a successor activity to begin while the predecessor activity is still going. Right? But the predecessor must finish first. So in this example, once a crew starts to grade landscape, task number 7, another crew can install the sod in the finished areas, but the final grading must be done when?
At the same time.
At the same time, right? So maybe on an IT project, if you're doing testing, if you're doing training, which kind of usually go hand in hand on a timeline perspective, they can have different start times, but they must finish before you start your activation plan, before you go live, before you cut over to production, right? Finish to finish relationship. Okay, sequence activities, leads and lags. Okay, definition, lead is the amount of time where a successor activity can be advanced with the respect to a predecessor activity. So the successor activity lead time is denoted by a minus sign, right? Followed by the lead time value expressed as either a time duration or a percentage of the predecessor's time duration. So this is again a FS, finish to start relationship, right? But it's got what? It's got 2 weeks lead time, right? The relationship is still there, but there's a little flexibility, right? The lead time can change. In this case, it can start 2 weeks earlier. Okay, let's look at the opposite. So now you've got lag, right? This is the amount of time where a successor activity is required to be delayed with respect to a predecessor activity. Successor activity's lag is denoted by a plus sign, right? Followed by the lag time value, right? Either expressed as time duration or percentage of the predecessor's time duration. So in this particular case, another FS relationship, right? Finish to start. But you've got some lag time, right? Where it doesn't necessarily need to begin right away, right? In this case, 2 weeks. Now, all comes together, right? We're building on this, right? So now you're back to the precedence schedule network here. Just graphical in nature, right? From start to finish. What are some things we see here?
Got a little more complicated.
You get more complicated, right? A little more spaghetti network, right?
Oh, yeah.
But you've got, we can see between F and G, you've got some lag by how many days?
15.
You've got lag between H and I by, you've got flexibility in your schedule. You can do a lot of things with flexibility, right? In the grander scheme of things, right? And then we just show some other start-to-start relationships between B and C. Again, if it runs silent and there are no characters, like between C and D and E, what is the assumption? What kind of relationship?
Start to finish.
Finish to
Finish to start, right. Finish to start when you don't see any particular characters, right? And I don't know who made that decision, but I would guess because most of the relationships are finish to start, no need to busy the diagram, right? Now you'll notice there is an FS here, but that's when a lag is called out. Okay, that's where you have to see it. Okay, we're doing good. Let's get deeper. How to estimate activity resources. Definition. The process of estimating the type and quantities of material, human resources, equipment, or supplies ready to perform each activity. So little note, this is on the PMI PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge, Edition 5. We call this knowledge area human resource management, right? In Edition 6, we now call it resource management. Why? Because resources are above and beyond human, right? So little change in direction for PMI. Resource calendars. It's a calendar that identifies the working days and shifts within each specific resource. Again, it could be human, it could be material resources that you need. You might need trucks when it's available. It's a critical input into estimate activity durations and develop schedules. Back to the folks who use Microsoft Project. Again, you don't necessarily need a sophisticated tool like Project. It just makes your life easier when you talk about things like automation, right? If you have workers on your team who are Americans and maybe Canadians, right? And they celebrate Boxing Day. That might not be a working day for your project. It might be the 9 national holidays that's baked into the tool. Also, if you have dates where you need to say just want working days, Monday through Friday. But guess what? My go live is on a Saturday, right? The tool is all managed within your resource calendars for the right computation, right? Especially when you're talking about, you need to calculate 3 months. A lot easier to do it with a tool versus fat fingering the number of days, right? Your quantification. Alternatives analysis. Build versus buy, comparing the time required to perform activities internally or if you need to go and procure contractors. We'll get into that. Published data could be things like industry, published data about labor costs and rates. You might use that to help estimate your resources. And then again, back to bottom-up estimating, a method of estimating project duration or cost by aggregating the estimates, again, from the lower level WBS, from the work package level, right? It's an excellent way to help estimate your resource needs in your project. There's also another thing called RBS. Who knows what RBS stands for?
Resource breakdown structure.
Resource breakdown structure. It's the same hierarchical decomposition, but your resources. And again, are we just talking about human resources? It could be your equipment resources, right? So you can have human resources as a box, a commodity like servers, and then you do your breakdown from there as well. And RBS also stands for risk breakdown structure. We got breakdown structures for everything in PMI, right? All right, let's see. Let's move on. How are we doing on time, Jerome? Did we start a little earlier?
Yeah, but another 10 minutes.
Okay. Yep. No problem. All right. Now, estimating activity durations. Definition: process of estimating the number of work periods needed to complete individual activities within the estimated resources will provide the amount of time each activity will take to complete. All right? Days, weeks, and hours, etc. So we talked about different types. This is called analogous estimating. I'm not sure if anyone's used analogous estimating, right? What happens if you don't have a lot of data on your project, but you know that a similar project or a portion of a project, similar in nature, was done at your respective client organization? You might refer to analogous estimating, right? Historical reference points where the builds might have been similar. Technique for estimating duration or cost of an activity or a project using historical data from a similar activity or project. Doesn't need to be the whole project, maybe a phase or a certain section or commodity that was procured is similar nature to the build. So I like this example, right? As our Starbucks are popping up all over New York City, you can probably use analogous estimating, right? If it's similar in nature. Now, when would you use this? It's efficient, it's cost effective, right? What's the negative aspect of analogous estimating? What is it not?
It's not accurate.
It's not necessarily accurate, and understandably so. So you would want to expose your estimating technique on how you arrived at what you arrived at to whoever you're presenting it to. Say this is, an analogous estimate. You might use things called, who's heard of ROM, rough order of magnitude. Well, there's an actual percentage of rough order of magnitude. It's between negative 25% and plus 75%, right? So you want to expose your estimating techniques and the metrics behind that.
The only thing, Joshua, most use.
Most people might go with this, or the
He's
figure
got a
out.
project plan for this. It's my man.
Yep. And nothing wrong with this. This works. This could work very well. All right. Another one is called parametric estimating. Who's heard of parametric estimating? Okay, few people. Estimating technique in which an algorithm is used to calculate cost or duration based on historical data, similar, and project parameters. But in this case, so the number of drawings multiplied, these are drawings, schematics, by the number of labor hours per drawing, or if it's a cable project, the number, the meters of cable multiplied by the number of labor hours per meter. Anytime there is that per in there is usually parametric, right? That's more straight math. Another way to estimate projects, right? Okay.
That's also good.
Okay, we got another one. So this one is called 3-point estimating, right? So the accuracy of a single point activity duration estimates, which can be improved by consideration. It originated from PERT, right? Program Evaluation Review Technique, right? Optimistic, pessimistic, most likely, right? So it's right there. estimate based on duration of the activity, given resources likely to be assigned, their productivity, realistic expectations of availability of the activities, dependencies on other participants, and interruptions. Optimistic, activity duration based on analysis of best case scenario. Pessimistic, worst case scenario. And that's the formula we use there as well.
And then Joshua, there's one that weights the
Yep.
most likely, right?
Yeah, so there's another one referred to as what's called beta, right, or triangulation, right? And what that does, it's the same algorithm of TO plus TM plus TP, but there's a 4 here. Now the reason there's a 4 is because you have extra weight on the most likely. And why do you think they do that? Because
most likely.
well, I think they've done a lot of studies, and they say when people generally estimate, okay, right? Well, when people generally estimate, they estimate positively. Like, we're going to make it. So a lot more strength is on the optimistic. So to kind of weight things out, you do 4 times the most likely, which is 4 times that particular
Unrealistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what the old PM is going to say. Give you the worst possible case.
The worst, right.
So we know
And
what.
then there's the MTA.
All right, develop schedule, definition, the process of analyzing activity sequences, durations, resource requirements, and schedule constraints to create the project schedule model by entering schedule activities, durations, resource availabilities, and logical relationships into the scheduling tool, generating a schedule model with plan dates for completing the project activities. So, let's go through this quickly. Well, who's here are the critical path? Critical path method? How many people have done the critical path? Okay. A little low, right? Yep. All right. So CPM, by definition, a method to estimate the minimum project duration and determine the amount of scheduling flexibility on the logical network paths to the schedule model. Now, the critical path, not to be confused with CPM, is the sequence of activities that represent the longest path through a project, which determines the shortest possible duration. Okay? I think many of us who have been in this business a while probably never liked that definition. Seems a bit ambiguous. We have more time. I can give you a quick way on really understanding that really quickly. All right, so let's look at the construct of this. You've got in this quadrant, right, of an activity. Let's call this the activity. In the upper left quadrant is the ES, the early start. Upper right, the early finish, so early start, the earliest point where the activity can begin. Early finish, the earliest possible point the activity can finish. Late start, latest possible point where the work can begin, and late finish, latest possible point where the activity can finish. Activity name generally can go here. Some people like to just use letters. You can use a WVS number if you want. The duration can go here. And then if there is float within your particular path, your logical path, you would populate the float there. There's something called the forward pass and the backward pass. We're going to take you through one quick example here. Okay, so calculating the path duration. So how many paths are there in this example?
2.
And what are they?
ACD and ACD.
ABD, ACD, right? If I were to ask you what's the critical path of this diagram, what would you say?
I'll say
There's something.
AC.
Wait.
Hearing ACD, why?
no.
How many days would this be?
15.
And how many would be ABD? 12. So based on that math alone, that would represent the critical path, right? Pretty straightforward. So you got, let's take a look at these activities real quick. A, do foundation work, you frame your walls, install building systems, and you install your drywall. So in this first take at it, you're establishing the right paths, and if there is a value there, so we're layering it a little bit more, you didn't have any values before, you've got the durations, right? You're able to understand a little bit more about what that plan looks like. Now, that's just the reveal. And then the only thing in tools like Project is normally, and by the way, if you go to Microsoft Project and you go to your view bar menu option and you hit the down arrow key, there is something called precedence network diagram. It will automatically show your activities in boxes, and there's a lot of flexibility you can do. It looks something like this, and you can change the metadata on each box, right? I like to do the start date, the end date, the WVS number, and it will automatically assume, it depends on your options, where the critical path is, and it'll light it up in red, which is nice. So this is just showing that the critical path here is in red. If you don't have that, you might just want to make it a darker, a heavier weight arrow. All right, so now you do the forward pass. So we're going to go through a very simple, quick exercise. Right, this is known as the forward pass. And one thing to know, there are two types of calculations when performing the forward pass and the backward pass. There's one called the same day calculation, and there's another one called the next day calculation. The easier one is the one we're going to do, which is the same day calculation. Either way you choose to use either one, you're going to arrive at the same number. Except the next day calculation has a little bit more arithmetic, a little bit more computation involved. So we're going to forego that for the sake of time. So in this case, we start with activity A. Right? We start with the early start, which is what? You add the duration, 5, which get you, right? So 5 is what you would populate in the early finish box. Now for the successor task, we'll go to B. We use the same value populated in the predecessor early finish box, and we populate this value for the task early start. In this case, we're just throwing over the 5. Right? You take the same calculation activity B, you add the 5 to the duration, you get 8. 8 is what you populate in the early finish. Okay, you do the same down here, you take the 5, move it over, you add the duration, you get 11, right? You take the, now in this case, when you have the D task, and you have more than one predecessor tasks, for the same day calculation, you take the largest or the latest date value, right, from the 2, and you populate that in the successor early start. So as you can see here, we're going to take 11, it's higher than 8, and you populate the 11, you add the duration plus 4, and you get to 15. Think of these in terms of dates. Think of this as May 1st and May 15th. A little easier way to get your head around this. I'm actually doing another class called Critical Path for Project Managers at another institution. I think I'm allowed to say that. Another institution in December. So we're going to get more. We do a whole class on this as well. All right. So now you've got the forward pass. Now you do the backwards pass, right? So now the first rule is you simplify the early finish value and populate this in the late finish value. So very simple. What you do is you take this number, you automatically drop it down, right? Your EF and your LF become the same. Same with your ES and your LS. You just drop it down. So that's easy, right? Next, you take the value from the late start box of the predecessor and you populate that in the successor activities. So starting with activity C, you take the late finish value of 11 and you minus the activity duration of, which gets you 5, right? So that becomes your late start value. Moving to activity B, you take the 11, you minus the 3, you get the 8. That gets populated in your late start. Now, similar here, you have multiple tasks here going into activity A, feeding. Which value do you use? In this case, you use the lowest value or the earliest start date. So 5 or 8, you're going to use the 5, right? You populate the 5 here. 5 minus the rate duration, 5 equals 0. And we've got the little cheat sheet right there as well to do the breakdown of all the calculations. So that's the backward pass. Now you need to calculate the total float as opposed to the free float. So the total float, you basically take the LF minus the EF or the LS minus the ES. It's the same exact calculation, meaning early finish minus the late finish, 0, right? So nothing gets populated in there. 11 minus 11,
0.
Nothing gets populated in there. 11 minus 8, 3. 3 days of float you just found in there. And then 5 minus 5, 0. Very, very simplified version of the forward and backward pass in getting the float. You got more flexibility in that particular area. Okay, a couple more things we want to cover. Crashing, fast tracking, resource leveling. Crashing and fast tracking are considered scheduling compression techniques. Resource optimization is considered leveling. Crashing, right? A technique used to shorten the schedule duration for the least incremental cost by adding resources, right? You may hear, we need to speed up the schedule, let's just throw some money at it, right? We're going to crash the schedule, right?
Yeah.
Now, one way you can do it,
is over time, you bring in additional resources to help expedite the delivery, but what's the potential risk in doing that?
Cost increases.
Cost increase, definitely a cost increase. What else? Quality, why the quality?
They're not trained.
Not trained.
They don't even know how to find the bathroom.
You're bringing people on, right? You're increasing risk to your project, and even if it was an adequate resource, you still need that onboarding time to get them acclimated with the project, right? Fast tracking, the technique which takes initially scheduled activities to run in sequence, and now what do? You're running them in parallel. Okay? So it may increase risk, quality, rushing deliverables, stretching resources, right? So there's a quality risk. Things that were initially set up when you built your project, scheduled your team to say these should run in sequence. Now you're taking a risk and say let's run it in parallel to try to get in faster. So if resources are stressed, the quality might not be that good, right? Right? And there was probably a good business reason why you did in the first place in sequence, right? But that's just another technique. Sometimes you got to do what you have to do.
Desperation.
Yep. Resource leveling is a technique on which start and finish dates are adjusted based on resource constraints with the goal of balancing demand for resources with the available supply. Can be used with shared or critically required resources and are only available at certain times or in limited quantities or over-allocated when a resource has been assigned to two or more activities in the same time frame. Quick example here is of resource leveling, right? So let's say in the original schedule you had 20 expert resources in the first 4 weeks of the project and none in the final or the next 8 weeks. The problem in this scenario is you only have 10 expert resources in your budget and there's no budget for additional resources. Right? So it's before you level, now you level, right? So in this solution, it eliminates the over-allocation issue. However, it may add what? 4 additional weeks, right? In your schedule if these activities are on the critical path. So resource leveling often increases the critical path, duration, and the project time, but just another way to weight it out that way. And then finally, in the home stretch here, we're just going to kind of show you more from a project schedule. It's kind of where everything comes together. Right? A little hard to see, but I believe we will be I will be sharing this deck with you guys. I might give you some other tools and some other trackers that we don't normally share, but I think we will give this to you through Jerome. So this is an example of a milestone filter. A little hard to see here, but everything's 0 days, right? Now there's a way in Microsoft Project, again, you don't need Project to do this, obviously, but the right exposure of the right scheduled data should get exposed to certain levels. So let's say this particular report would go to someone like the executive report. Most likely the executives do not want to see your full project detail plan. They don't understand it, they don't want to see it, that's not the right audience. So maybe you just expose the milestones. If you set up your project scheduling correctly with 0 duration, true milestone task names, which is a suffix of the word complete, basically you just hit a filter, you click on milestones, and it calls out all your milestones. One version. Second version. This is, which one is this? The summary filter. We talked a lot about the summary filter, right? So the summary filter are your roll-ups. Usually they're in boldface with your detailed itemized tasks there. So there's a collapse view in project where it collapses all your detail plans, and there's a roll-up. This would just expose the roll-up. A good audience for this might be your key stakeholders, right? And then finally, one is the full baked out project detail plan, all the items, all the activities exposed, your summary roll-up, your drill down, and your roll-up task. That's you. This is where you make your living, right? Having good control of the project schedule, as well as your full project team. The last one we're going to get into is executive metrics. Again, this is all about data, it's all about scheduling. So these are what I call hill climber metrics. Right? We've implemented this at a lot of organizations. Plan to actual, right? Your variance analysis. Remember, pictures tell a great story. So in this particular example, we go through a few here. This is an example of your builds. So let's say in this case you're building how many interfaces? 60. Your blue line represents your plan. So you started back, hard to see here, but let's call it January, and then by June you need to build 60 interfaces on this project. So your spread is your plan. That was the plan in your Microsoft. You built all these activities, you had start and end dates, and that's what it looked like in the grand scheme of things. You're going to build 60. Now, as you're going through here, the pink line represents your actuals. right? So if the pink line in this case is over the planned, is that good or bad? No, it's good. It's good. It's over, right?
Yeah.
Over is a little tricky the way it's written, but you're ahead of schedule, right? If you're under, you're behind schedule, right? So what happened here? Let's look at the story point.
Yeah.
Ahead of schedule, right? Then what happened here?
Stuck there for
Flatlined. This is an excellent way for you to tell a story. Maybe the workers went on strike, right? Maybe there were some design changes. Maybe there was some gold plating, right? Some scope creep. So something happened here. And then what happened here? Maybe a change order got executed. You threw some resources at it, right? You changed direction. You got a different consulting company. But you can see it went from 15 builds all the way up to 30, up and up. And at the end of the day, what happened? What's a story point? We finished ahead of schedule, right? Like 4 weeks.
Really?
I think you can
America.
We converted, no, so agile, those are considered burn down charts. It goes the other way. Yep. We can do burn up charts as well. Yep.
Josh,
Yes.
what creates that? Is that something you can't do that in
So a little surprise. We're going to give you. I'm going to give you guys a template we use. Don't normally do this on how to build these. Okay. You can do it in Excel. We don't have time to show you how. Another class, another time, Jerome. But we'll give you the how-to on how to build this. Joe, we're just going to flip through these. So just think about. I always say when you have your projects, think about quantifiable metrics that make sense. Don't build metrics just for the sake of building metrics. They build metrics that are useful, right? One that tells a quick story, and do one with where it's got some numbers to it. If you got 3 deliverables, your chart's going to look like that. That's not much of a story to tell. So think about your testing metrics, right? In this case, this one is this is more builds. This is test scripts. So you need to build those test cases, right? How many test cases I got to build? 6, right? At the end of the day, they made it, right? And again, you're reporting this week to week, so you're going to see a tick mark here. Then a tick mark here. You're going to be, usually I like to add this after that executive dashboard report. I have my metrics right underneath. So you flip to your meetings, and some people just like to go right to the metrics. You can say, okay, we're in this week, this wouldn't need to be exposed. You can see that you're behind schedule, and you're monitoring that week to week. Take a look at another one here. So this one, we've got a lime green line in here. This is test cases. So your planned number of test execution, rather, not test cases. So now you're actually executing the test. You wanted to do 74 test cases. There's a difference between executing and pass. So you can execute a test case, doesn't mean it passed. It might have failed, went back to break fix. So your pink represents executed, and then green represents the ones that passed. Another way to tell a story. That's it, scripts. More of the same. You can use it for training, and you can use it for percentages. So if you had X number of training classes to be delivered by this time frame, your planned actual, you can break it down from here. Now, just the one last thing is these go hand in hand with your trackers, right? So I'll just jump to the last one here. So basically, you have your project management executive dashboard report. You have your metrics, but you want detailed trackers, which is where all your data is stored. How many test cases, how many trackers, and then that will feed into your metrics. And again, we will give you a copy of that that template. And that's it.
By the way, I took lots of notes here, and if you're actually preparing for the PMP exam, I'm telling you, a lot of the things that will be covered around here. And not only that, but when you speak at work and you talk to your executive team, it's always good to sort of use some of the terminology that Josh talked about here. So when you listen to the WVS, the AON, the arrow on node, finish to start to finish, the 100% rule. When you sit for the exam, you have to know all this in the critical path, the slack, lead, human resource management. They talk about breakdown structures. Anybody know how many breakdown structures there are in the PMI handbook? Breakdown structure. He talked about the work breakdown structure.
And there's another one, OBS, organization
There's
breakdown.
two.
I think there are 3.
Yeah, it's 4.
Work breakdown structure, organizational, resource, and risk. So there are 4.
Yeah.
These are all the things that are critical. But Josh, thank you very much. This was very good. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.